Hello, and welcome to the Azure Cost Management and Billing for ISVs One-to-Many session. We'll be covering the various features and benefits of utilizing cost management and billing within Azure, both to monitor your current spend and to project your future spend. I'm Hale Manassi, and along with me, my co-presenter, Brandon Martinez. We'll be guiding you on the best practices of Azure Cost Management.
For the purposes of this session, we are making the assumption that you have an active Azure subscription, along with resource groups and resources already set up. This will provide the basis for looking at historical spend, future projections, as well as setting up additional features like budget alerts. If you do not have a subscription or resources currently set up, you can still follow along and start to prepare for your future spend.
With Microsoft Azure, you can improve the technical performance of your business workloads, as well as reduce your costs and the overhead required to manage organizational assets. However, the business opportunity creates a risk because of the potential for waste and inefficiencies that are introduced into your cloud deployments.
Cost management and billing is a suite of tools that help analyze, manage, and optimize the cost of your workloads. Using the suite helps ensure that your organization is taking advantage of the benefits provided by the cloud.
With services in Azure, you only pay for what you use. Some resources may be charged for the period of time of execution. Others will be charged for as long as the resource exists. Because of the deployment ease of new resources, the cost of your workloads can jump significantly without proper analysis and monitoring.
With Azure Cost Management and Billing, you'll be able to perform the analysis and proactive activities required to keep your costs under control, such as conduct billing administrative tasks, such as paying your bill, manage billing access to costs, download cost and usage data that was used to generate your monthly invoice, proactively apply data analysis to your costs, set spending thresholds, and identify opportunities for workload changes that can optimize your spending.
One of the most common views in Azure Cost Management is viewing actual and forecasted costs by service. These views are useful for seeing how much you have accumulated within the selected time range, as well as projecting what your end-of-period costs will be. Forecasted costs are shown in cost analysis areas with area and stacked column views. The forecast is based on your historical resource use. However, keep in mind that changes to your resource use affect the forecasted costs. In the Azure portal, navigate to Cost Analysis for your scope. For example, click Cost Management and Billing, select Cost Management, and then hit Cost Analysis. In the default view, the top chart has the actual cost and forecasted cost sections. The solid color of the chart shows your actual cost, while the shaded color shows the forecasted cost.
The default view doesn't show forecasted costs grouped by service, so you have to add a Group By selection. In the Azure portal, navigate to Cost Analysis for your scope. For example, Cost Management and Billing, Cost Management, and Cost Analysis. Select Group By Service Name. The view shows your costs grouped for each service. The forecasted cost isn't calculated for each service. It's projected for the total of all your services. However, you can view forecasted costs narrowed to a single service. For example, you might want to see forecasted costs for just virtual machines. Select Add Filter, and then select Service Name. In the Choose list, select a service. For example, select Virtual Machines. Review the actual cost for selection and the forecasted cost. You can add more customizations to the view. Add a second filter for meter, and select a value to filter for an individual type of meter under your selected service name. Group by resource to see the specific resources that are accruing costs. The forecasted cost isn't calculated for each service. It's projected for the total of all your resources.
Viewing costs by an Azure service can help you to better understand the parts of your infrastructure that cost the most. For example, VM compute costs might be small, yet you might accrue significant networking costs because of the amount of information emitting from your VMs. Understanding the primary cost drivers of your Azure services is essential so that you can adjust service usage as needed. In the Azure portal, navigate to Cost Analysis for your scope. Select Cost by Service and then Group by Service Tier. Change the view to Table.
To view your invoice details in the Azure portal, navigate to Cost Analysis for the scope associated with the invoice that you are analyzing. Select the Invoice Details view. Invoice Details shows you the charges as seen on the invoice. Viewing invoice details, you can identify the service that has unexpected costs and determine which resources are directly associated with the resource in cost analysis. For example, if you want to analyze charges for the virtual machine service, navigate to the Accumulated Cost view. Then, set the granularity to daily and filter charges to service name, virtual machines, and group charges by resource.
Your services are built with Azure resources. Reviewing costs based on resources can help you quickly identify your primary cost contributors. The view is only available for subscription and resource group scopes. In the Azure portal, navigate to Cost Analysis for your scope. Select Cost by Resource. Change the view to Table.
Dimensions allow you to organize your costs based on various metadata values shown in your charges. For example, you could group your costs by location. In the Azure portal, navigate to Cost Analysis for your scope. Select the Group By filter. Select a group by item. Optionally, you can save the view for later use. Click a pie chart below the graph to view more detailed data.
Looking at daily and monthly costs can help you to better understand if there's a time of the week or year where your costs are higher. If you have more customer traffic in a holiday period, does that lead to a corresponding increase in your Azure costs? Is Friday a more costly day than a Monday? In the Azure portal, once again, navigate to Cost Analysis for your scope. Set the granularity to monthly or daily.
Many Azure users apply tags to their resources, such as a cost center or development environment, like production or test, to better categorize charges. Tags appear as a dimension in cost analysis. You can use the dimension to gain insights into your custom tagging categorizations. Support for tags applies to usage reported after the tag was applied to the resource. Tags aren't applied retroactively for cost rollups. In the Azure portal, navigate to Cost Analysis for your scope. Select Group By for your tag. Your usage details report file, in CSV format, provides a breakdown of all the charges that accrued towards an invoice. You can use the report to compare it to and better understand your invoice. Each billed charge on your invoice corresponds to broken down charges in the usage report. In the Azure portal, navigate to the Usage and Charges tab for EA accounts, or Invoices tab for pay-as-you-go accounts. Select the line item to download from, and then click the download symbol. Download the usage and charges or invoice file. Select the usage file to download.
After you've identified and analyzed your spending patterns, it's important to begin setting limits for yourself and your teams. The ways that cost management helps you plan for and control your costs include cost analysis, budgets, recommendations, and exporting cost management data. Right now, we will be talking about budgets. Budgets and cost management help you plan for and drive organizational accountability. They help you inform others about their spending to proactively manage costs and to monitor how spending progresses over time. You can configure alerts based on your actual cost or forecasted cost to ensure that your spend is within your organizational spend limit.
Budgets require at least one cost threshold, which is the percentage of the overall budget, and a corresponding email address. You can optionally include up to 5 thresholds and 5 email addresses in a single budget. When a budget threshold is met, email notifications are normally sent within an hour of the evaluation. Actual costs budget alerts are generated for the actual cost you've accrued in relation to the budget thresholds configured. Forecasted cost shows the total anticipated costs for a time period you choose. Cost and usage data is typically available within 8 to 24 hours, and budgets are evaluated against these costs every 24 hours. Be sure to get familiar with cost and usage data update specifics. Budgets reset automatically at the end of a period, monthly, quarterly, or annually, for the same budget amount when you select an expiration date in the future. Because they reset with the same budget amount, you need to create separate budgets when budgeted currency amounts differ for future periods. When a budget expires, it's automatically deleted.
To create or view a budget, open a scope in the Azure portal and select Budgets in the menu. For example, navigate to Subscriptions, select a subscription from the list, and then select Budgets in the menu. After you create budgets, they show a simple view of your current spending against them. Select Add. In the Create Budget window, make sure that the scope shown is correct. Choose any filters that you want to add. Filters allow you to create budgets on specific costs such as resource groups in a subscription or a service like Azure Machines. Any filter you can use in cost analysis can also be applied to a budget. After you identify your scope and filters, type a budget name. Then choose a monthly, quarterly, or annual budget reset period. The reset period determines the time window that's analyzed by the budget. The cost evaluated by the budget starts at 0 at the beginning of each new period. Next, identify the expiration date when the budget becomes invalid and stops evaluating your costs. Based on the fields chosen in the budget so far, a graph is shown to help you select the threshold to use for your budget. The suggested budget is based on the highest forecasted cost that you might incur in future periods. In the preceding example, you created a budget for a subscription. You can also create a budget for a resource group. If you want to create a budget for a resource group, navigate to Cost Management and Billing, Subscriptions, select a subscription, select Resource Groups, select your specific resource group, click Budgets, and then add a budget. When the budget thresholds you've created are exceeded, only notifications are triggered. None of your resources are affected and your consumption isn't stopped. You can use budgets to compare and track spending as you analyze costs. So now that you have the budget in place, you can set alerts when you have exceeded or close to exceeding your budget.
Budget alerts notify you when spending, based on usage or cost, reaches or exceeds the amount defined in the alert condition of the budget. Cost management budgets are created using the Azure portal or the Azure Consumption API. There are 3 types of cost alerts overall: budget alerts, credit alerts, and department spending quota alerts. Credit alerts notify you when your Azure prepayment, previously called monetary commitment, is consumed. Azure prepayment is for organizations with enterprise agreements. Credit alerts are generated automatically at 90% and at 100% of your Azure prepayment credit balance. Whenever an alert is generated, it's reflected in cost alerts and in the email sent to the account owners. Department spending quota alerts notify you when department spending reaches a fixed threshold of the quota. Spending quotas are configured in the EA portal. Whenever a threshold is met, it generates an email to department owners and is shown in cost alerts.
Now we will dive into budget alerts to go along with the budget we just created. In the Azure portal, budgets are defined by cost. Using the Azure Consumption API, budgets are defined by cost or by consumption usage. Budget alerts support both cost-based and usage-based budgets. Budget alerts are generated automatically whenever the budget alert conditions are met. You can view all cost alerts in the Azure portal. Whenever an alert is generated, it's shown in cost alerts. An alert email is also sent to the people in the alert recipients list of the budget. Forecasted alerts provide advanced notification that your spending trends are likely to exceed your budget. The alerts use forecasted cost predictions. Alerts are generated when the forecasted cost projection exceeds the set threshold. You can configure a forecasted threshold or percent of the budget. When a forecasted budget threshold is met, notifications are normally sent within an hour of evaluation. To toggle between configuring an actual versus forecasted cost alert, use the type field when configuring the alert as shown on screen. If you want to receive emails, add azure-no-reply@microsoft.com to your approved senders list so that emails don't go to your junk email folder. If you create a budget with the Budgets API, you can also assign roles to people to receive alerts. Alert limits support a range of 0.01% to 100% of the budget threshold that you've provided. When you create or edit a budget for a subscription or resource group scope, you can configure it to call an action group. The action group can perform various actions when your budget threshold is met. Action groups are currently only supported for subscription and resource group scopes. To create or update action groups, select Manage Action Group while you're creating or editing a budget. Next, select Add Action Group and create the action group. To view cost alerts, open the desired scope in the Azure portal, select Cost Alerts in the menu. The total number of active and dismissed alerts appear on the Cost Alerts page. All alerts show the alert type. A budget alert shows the reason why it was generated and the name of the budget it applies to. Each alert shows the date it was generated, its status, and the scope, which is the subscription or management group, that the alert applies to. Alert details show more information about the alert. Budget alerts include a link to the budget. If a recommendation is available for a budget alert, then a link to the recommendation is also shown. Budget, credit, and department spending quota alerts have a link to Analyze and Cost Analysis where you can explore costs for the alert scope.
Budgets are commonly used as part of cost control. Budgets can be scoped in Azure. For instance, you could narrow your budget view based on subscription, resource groups, or a collection of resources. But what happens when you want to take action on the alerts received instead of just getting notified? There are several methods to perform actual actions once an alert is received. This includes creating an Azure Automation Runbook to stop VMs by using webhooks, create an Azure Logic app to be triggered based on the budget threshold value and call the runbook with the right parameters, or create an Azure Monitor action group that will be configured to trigger the Azure Logic app when the budget threshold is met. Azure Automation is a service that enables you to script most of your resource management tasks and run those tasks as either scheduled or on demand. There are pre-generated runbooks you can use to configure those actions. For example, you can use the Stop Azure V2 VMs graphical runbook from the gallery to build this scenario. Logic apps help you build, schedule, and automate processes as workflows so you can integrate apps, data, systems, and services across enterprises or organizations. Budgets can be set up to trigger a notification when a specified threshold is met. You can provide multiple thresholds to be notified at, and the Logic app will demonstrate the ability for you to perform different actions based on the threshold.
The cloud resource infrastructure that you've built for your organization is likely complex. Many Azure resource types can have different types of charges. Azure resources might be owned by different teams in your organization, and they might have different billing model types that apply to various resources. To gain a better understanding of the charges, begin your analysis using one or more of the strategies that we'll go over now.
How you purchase your Azure services helps you determine the methodology and tools that are available to you as you identify the resource associated with the charge. To determine which methodology applies to you, first determine your Azure offer type. Then, identify your customer category in the list of supported Azure offers. Your Azure bill aggregates charges for the month on a per meter basis. Meters are used to track a resource's usage over time and are used to calculate your bill. When you create a single Azure resource, like a virtual machine, one or more meter instances are created for the resource. Navigate to the usage CSV file previously created. Filter the usage CSV file based on the meter name as shown on the bill that you want to analyze to see all line items that apply to the meter. The instance ID for the line item corresponds to the actual Azure resource that generated the charge. When you've identified the resource in question, you can use cost analysis and cost management to further analyze the costs related to the resource. To view your invoice details in the Azure portal, navigate to Cost Analysis for the scope associated with the invoice that you're analyzing. Select the Invoice Details view. Invoice details show you the charges as seen on the invoice.
Another way to predict cost is using the pricing calculator. The pricing calculator allows you to input all the Azure services you are utilizing and their corresponding SKUs to get an estimate of how much it will cost. Enter your compute, databases, anticipated ML charges, etc. into your calculator with its expected usage, and it will generate an Excel sheet of how much every single service would cost. This is a great way to predict how much your Azure spend will be month to month before committing to any specific Azure services.
Azure Advisor helps you optimize and reduce your overall Azure spend by identifying idle and underutilized resources. You can get cost recommendations from the Cost tab on the Advisor dashboard. Sign in to the Azure portal, search for and select Advisor from any page. On the Advisor dashboard, select the Cost tab.
There are certain cost-saving things that you can do as well. Using Azure Spot virtual machines allows you to take advantage of your unused capacity at a significant cost savings. At any point in time when Azure needs the capacity back, the Azure infrastructure will evict Azure Spot virtual machines. Therefore, Azure Spot virtual machines are great for workloads that can handle interruptions like batch processing jobs, dev test environments, large compute workloads, and much more. There are other small things you can do to cut down costs. This includes deleting unassociated public IP addresses to save money, or buying reserved virtual machine instances to save money over pay-as-you-go costs.
Another thing to consider when thinking through cost management is Azure Policy. Azure Policy helps to enforce organizational standards and to assess compliance at scale. Through its compliance dashboard, it provides an aggregated view to evaluate the overall state of the environment, with the ability to drill down to the per resource, per policy granularity. It also helps to bring your resources to compliance through bulk remediation for existing resources and automatic remediation for new resources. Common use cases for Azure Policy include implementing governance for resource consistency, regulatory compliance, security, cost, and management. Policy definitions for these common use cases are already available in your Azure environment as built-ins to help you get started.
Individual cloud policy statements are guidelines for addressing specific risks identified during your risk assessment process. These statements should provide a concise summary of risks and plans to deal with them. Each statement definition should include these three key pieces of information: business risk, policy statement, and design options. Business risk can be defined as a summary of the risk this policy will address. The policy statement is a clear summary explanation of the policy requirements. And the design options are actionable recommendations, specifications, or other guidance that IT teams and developers can use when implementing the policy.
We've covered a lot of ground today. We hope that this has given you the overview you need to get started with cost management on Azure. Being aware of your cost habits and spend can allow you to make more informed decisions on your resource allocation. Use the resources on screen for more information on what we've talked about today. Thank you for watching, and I hope this helps you invent with purpose on Microsoft Azure.